So when I did my three big stories, which was actually 10 big stories, because there's a lot to talk about today, I had not yet seen Donald Trump's last rant on Truth Social. We're going to unpack it line by line. This is important to understand what he's saying that's not quite right or why he's saying things. Okay, so now there are two big schools of thought here about why he's doing what he's doing, and I can't tell you which is which. I hope that it's one and not the other. So one big thought is that he is just Putin's puppet. He's going to kiss Putin's ring. He has a great like of Russians, and he's just going to do what he can to help promote the Russian cause. The other school of thought is kind of different. So I'm watching Fox News. Well, I'm not watching it. It's on in the background while I'm doing something else. And I'm just listening to the commentator who's talking about how, so Trump, he did this, think about what he did with Greenland. Now I'm thinking, think what he did about Greenland. Like he just antagonized all our allies. But the commentator said this, and it's worth considering. His negotiating skills are so great. Now, take it with a grain of salt if you don't like Trump. His negotiating skills are so great. All he had to do was talk about Greenland, and the Danish government has made changes and are spending extra on defense in Greenland where they weren't doing it before, and the Chinese are no longer welcome there, and that sort of thing. Okay, maybe that's what's going on. I'd like to think that's what's going on, but if you do that, you're kind of like your friends aren't going to want to play with you anymore. That's just not a good way of going about doing that. But okay, let's say that that's what it is. So we're going to unpack Trump's most recent Truth Social post, and we're going to try to understand what's happening here. Before we do, because he's talking about spending $350 billion into a war that couldn't be won. What? Okay, 350. Let's first start with this. Zelensky just said that the US gave us a total of 67 billion in weapons, 31 billion in budget programs. Trump's claim that he'll return 500 billion in fossil fuels is frivolous talk. Now, part of the reason that Trump is doing this is because Zelensky just started answering back in a not necessarily nicer way. Like Zelensky has tended to be pretty conciliatory and say things that, line up with where Trump is. Now, here's how Trump operates, regardless of whether he's doing something for Putin or doing something for Zelensky in order to make a deal. He's always talking about, like, if you agree with him, you're the best, you're huge, you're the greatest, whatever. If you disagree with him, you're the worst. I can't stand him. He's incompetent. He's right. So that's the way that he tends to operate, generally speaking. So tuck that away before we continue. Okay. So Zelensky is kind of talking back a little bit. Trump's not going to like that. But is this 67 and 31? That seems like a pretty low figure. It's not 500 billion, but it's a low figure. So just went to Grok. This is the AI in Twitter. Okay, how much foreign aid has the U.S. given to Ukraine since 24 February 2022? Be clear and specific in total U.S. dollars, then break into a percentage. Okay, so now again, it's AI, so it might be a little bit off, but I think this sounds right from what I've seen. 175 billion in total aid to Ukraine. Here's the breakdown by type of aid, presented as percentages of the total. So you have military aid at approximately 61% of total aid, which is about 107 billion. That part seems a little high. Both direct and military assistance and funds used to replenish U.S. military stockpiles. Okay, so maybe that's that, and the 60-something is what's gone to Ukraine, and the difference has gone to stockpile. I don't know. Economic and humanitarian aid, another 39%, totaling around 68 billion. Okay, then I went to actually go say, okay, so what sources can confirm what's going on? So this is the U.S. State Department, 20 January 2025, that's the date, U.S. security cooperation with Ukraine. It should be a pretty good source. Okay, to date, we have provided 65.9 billion in military assistance since Russia launched its premeditated, unprovoked, and brutal full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24th, 2022. And then it goes on, and approximately 69.2 billion in military assistance since Russia's initial invasion of Ukraine in 2014. Okay, so let's say that there's another 69 billion. So let's take these rough figures, and so north of 150 is a rough cut, and then we add another 70 for since 2014. That's the way that we're going to frame this. Now, it's very rough cut math, but let's look at this, because this is somewhat ridiculous. Think of this. Think of it, a modestly successful comedian. Okay, now remember what I talked about. If you're out of good graces with Trump, he's going to denigrate, because that's how he reacts. He's continually reactive. Volodymyr Zelensky talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go to a war that couldn't be won. So let's just talk about the 350. We're nowhere near 350. Any way that you cut this, nowhere near it. And Zelensky, if you go back to here, could not possibly be responsible for since 2014. Well, I mean, he could be responsible from 2019 forward. He can't be responsible for 2014 to 2019 as he wasn't in office. But then the part that really gets me is to go to a war that couldn't be won. That's quite a declaration for somebody who's trying to be an honest broker. Okay, let's go on to the next part. And I changed it because I want to go line by line so the colors change. That never had to start, but the war that he, without the U.S. and Trump, will never be able to settle. Okay, never had to start. I agree. It didn't have to start. Russia started it, and unfortunately, that's where we are. But it never had to start. And he's probably insinuating that somehow the Ukrainians caused it, or NATO caused it, or something along these lines. But that's not it at all. And go back and see what I talked about with the NATO timeline, and you can see how things played out. I just did that video yesterday or the day before. Okay, now this next line is interesting, because that without the U.S. and Trump, we'll never be able to settle. Okay, that's Trump patting himself on the back, saying, "See, only I can do this," because he tends to praise himself quite a bit in these truth social posts. The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe. That's just patently not true. It's just not true. You're not at 200 billion to begin with, unless you factor in, perhaps maybe you're getting there if you factor in the aid from 2014 forward. But okay, let's say. So let's just clarify these lines. And Europe's money is guaranteed, while the United States will get nothing back. I don't know that that's the case. I don't know that Europe has loaned. I think some of what I've seen has been loans. I think, or guaranteed based on the assets that are being used by, the Russian assets that are guaranteeing some things. I think some of that is what we're talking about, but not like general loans where you have to pay back. It's guaranteed by the interest of those assets. Okay, some of that is, but not all of it. Why didn't sleepy Joe Biden? Okay, here we go. Trump's still in campaign mode for some reason I don't quite understand. Why didn't sleepy Joe Biden demand equalization, in that the war is far more important to Europe than it is to us? We have a big, beautiful ocean as separation. It's true. We do. Europe has a greater, or should have a greater burden, because it is closer, and we do have separation. But we still are part of the same world, and we still can't abandon our allies. And this is a bad thing to let an autocracy knock over a democracy and just kind of wink at it. That's okay. At any rate, I'm not going to belabor that. Okay, and then he goes on. On top of this, Zelensky admits that half the money we sent him is missing. Okay, but it's not like that. This is like a Russian talking point kind of thing. Not that the money didn't get there because it went into U.S. production, but he's suggesting it like it's stolen. They're a bunch of crooks. Oh dear. Okay, he refuses to have elections. Refuses to have elections is. You can't have elections constitutionally within their governmental system during time of martial law, the war has to end so that they can have elections. Okay, which is very low. He refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls, and the only thing. Okay, let's talk about the very low in Ukrainian polls. This morning, the KIIS, that's a reputable polling firm, published a poll showing 57% trust Zelensky, and Trump said it was 4%. Now, so it's like he's in just another world here with some of these statements. He refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls, and the only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle. Again, it's like he's still campaigning against Biden. A dictator without elections. Now that's strong language. Zelensky better move fast, or he's not going to have a country left. Okay, that line gives me weird comfort in the sense that it kind of tells me that he's trying to move Zelensky to negotiate because that's what his focus is. And that tells me it's the theory about, or at least partially the theory about how he's trying to negotiate to get the people to the table to do whatever he's trying to accomplish. I think it's a terrible way of doing it, but I think that that's true. Now, he may still be beholden to Putin in the process while he is doing that. That both of those could coincide. That is possible. I just don't know, and I don't have the evidence to prove one way or another with that. Okay. In the meantime, we are successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something I'll admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Here's that patting himself on the back thing that he does very often. Biden never tried. Europe has failed to bring peace. Okay, well, yeah, Biden didn't try to do that because Biden was actually, as an ally or a friend of Ukraine, trying to support them. So, well, why would he be doing that? Okay, Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. Remember, Zelensky's the worst because he said bad things about me. That's how Trump rolls, so understand that this is what's going on. I love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. Remember, you're the worst, you're terrible, you're whatever. With his country is shattered and millions have unnecessarily died. Okay, when I read this, I hear that Trump is trying to move him to a particular place by saying this or saying that. You're either flattering and saying really good things. Now, I would imagine that if Putin comes out later and says something that Trump doesn't like or disagrees with, or says, who is Trump to try to stand over us and make a deal? We're equals, or something like that. You're going to see the same kind of language that you saw here with Zelensky, where he's saying that Zelensky is probably still wanting the gravy train and he's done a terrible job. So, with that, we'll see in time whether that is an accurate assessment or not, but that's how I'm reading what's going on. Tell me how you're reading what's going on, and let me also put a caveat here before you start typing. This is terrible. I don't like this. I think that this is a terrible way to try to wage diplomacy. Maybe it works in a business deal of some sort, but this is a terrible way because you're in diplomacy, you're creating such waves. My earlier video today was entitled "The Week That Shook the World." You don't want to shake the world, generally speaking, with diplomacy. You want to keep things calm. Trump doesn't want to keep things calm. That's where we are, my friends. This was a terrible statement, but I don't know. We know what it is, but we don't quite know why. I am willing to entertain that it is because he's in Putin's pocket, but I don't know that I have evidence. I also think that the other theory is pretty powerful when you consider how Trump negotiates historically. All right, we'll be looking to see what happens next, my friends. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.